The emergency room still echoed with the last faint cries when I walked in on Sarah, tangled in sheets with Greg Miller, their bodies a blur of limbs. He fumbled for his pants, a coward bolting past my frozen form. Sarah choked out, "Ethan, I'm sorry." Her voice, a thin wire snapping, barely registered above the ringing in my ears. The hospital scent clung to my clothes as I pulled into the driveway just after 3 in the morning. 16 hours in the operating room had left me hollowed out, the steady hum of my own exhaustion filling the silence. The house usually felt like a sanctuary, a quiet place to shed the weight of other people's lives. Tonight, something was off. Sarah's sedan, a silver Buick, sat under the oak tree. She had told me she was out of state, a pharmaceutical summit in Milwaukee, a 3-day event. A chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air worked its way up my spine. Then I saw the front door, not quite latched, a sliver of darkness on showing. I pushed it open, the movement making no sound. The house was too quiet, yet not truly silent. A faint, unfamiliar glow bled from beneath the master bedroom door upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, the carpet muffling my steps, a sound emerged, low and indistinct at first. Laughter. Not Sarah's usual bright laugh, but a hushed, conspiratorial giggle, followed by a deeper, unfamiliar chuckle. My hand found the doorknob, cold beneath my fingers. Then I heard it, Sarah's voice, a familiar cadence, twisted by the words she spoke. "He might be at the hospital all night." The phrase, often a relief to me on busy nights, now felt like a shard of ice. I pushed the door open, not gently, but with a force that made the frame shudder. The scene was stark, illuminated by the bedside lamp. Sarah was there, her body entangled in the crisp white sheets, a man with sandy hair and a startled expression scrambling beside her. He was fumbling for his pants, his face crimson. Greg Miller. The name flashed through my mind, a stray thought, a piece of information I hadn't asked for but now possessed. He looked at me, his eyes wide, then launched himself from the bed, grabbing his shirt as he bolted past me, a blur of panicked movement and exposed skin. I stood frozen in this doorway, the cool air from the hallway hitting my face. Sarah pulled a sheet up to her chin, her face blotchy, tears welling. "Ethan," she choked out, her voice raspy. "It's not what it looks like. I'm sorry." My voice felt foreign, a low, guttural sound I barely recognized. "Who the hell was that?" She flinched, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. It's Greg. From work. I know, Ethan, I know. But you're always gone. I get so lonely here. You're never home." Her excuses hung in the air, thin and transparent. I didn't argue. There was nothing to say. The sight had lodged itself behind my eyes, a permanent etching. "Get dressed," I said, my voice flat, empty of emotion. "We'll talk tomorrow. Tonight, I can't." I turned, walking back down the stairs, leaving the door open behind me, the faint glow from the bedroom casting long, accusing shadows. I made my way to the living room, collapsing onto the worn leather couch, the hospital exhaustion now replaced by a deeper, bone-weary dread. The sun was a pale smear in the eastern sky when I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, only to wake an hour later, the image still seared into my mind. The house remained silent, the air thick with unspoken things. Around 8, I heard movement upstairs, then the soft tread of feet on the wooden floor. Sarah appeared in the living room doorway, her face puffy, eyes red-rimmed. She wore a robe tied tight, as if to ward off the chill that had settled between us. "Ethan," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, I messed up." I looked at her, my gaze steady, unwavering. "His name was Greg Miller, right?" She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Yes, he works in accounting." "The summit in Milwaukee," I continued. "That was a lie, wasn't it?" Her shoulders slumped. "Yes, I know it was wrong. It was just a one-time slip, Ethan. It meant nothing." I watched the dust motes dance in the weak morning light filtering through the window. A one-time slip doesn't require a 3-day cover story. That's premeditation, Sarah. My voice was still flat, clinical. "You'll sleep in the guest room tonight, and every night for a while." She started to protest, but I raised a hand, stopping her. "Go." Later, I called my father, Robert Campbell, hoping for a shred of understanding, some paternal wisdom. He answered on the second ring, his voice gruff. What is it, Ethan? You sound like you just saw a ghost. I explained, the words feeling hollow even as I spoke them. There was a pause. Well, what did you expect? You're never home. You leave a woman alone too long. Things happen. You're still young. You need a reliable man. You need to grow a spine, son, and decide what kind of life you want to lead. His advice was a cold stone, offering no comfort. My mother, Carol Campbell, called an hour later. She had heard it in my father's clipped tone, an instinct she always possessed. Ethan, honey, what's wrong? Your father sounded agitated. Is everything all right? Her voice was soft, laced with genuine concern. I told her, the words easier this time, though the pain was still a raw wound. She listened, not interrupting, just a quiet hum of understanding on the other end. Oh, Ethan, she finally said, her voice catching. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Just know I love you, and I'm here for you, no matter what. Her words were a balm, a stark contrast to my father's pragmatism. Throughout the day, my phone buzzed with Sarah's texts, a flurry of apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness. Each vibration was a reminder, a small jab. I ignored them, letting them stack up, a small measure of control in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. Let her sweat. The operating room was a place where my personal life ceased to exist. Scalpel in hand, I moved with practiced precision, the rhythm of surgery, a familiar comfort. The mask covered most of my face, but the intense focus in my eyes, the slight tension around them, would have been invisible to anyone but me. Patients were real, their bodies laid bare, demanding my complete attention. This was a clean, logical world, a stark contrast to the messy, illogical reality waiting at home. I buried the images, the hollow words, the sudden lurch in my gut. For 16 hours, I was Ethan, the surgeon. Nothing else. That evening, the quiet of the guest room felt like a thin barrier. Sarah knocked gently, then entered, her eyes swollen. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting in her lap. Ethan, she began, her voice raw, we have to fix this. Please, let's go to counseling. I'll do anything, anything you want to make this right. Her voice broke, a small sob escaping. I looked at the patterned wallpaper, avoiding her gaze. Counseling, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. What do you expect it to do, Cora? It won't erase what I saw. It won't bring back trust. That's not something you just rebuild with a few conversations. But I want to try, she pleaded. I promise. I'll cut off all contact with Greg. I'll prove it to you. Wow. Her words, meant to soothe, felt brittle, hollow. Cut off all contact. How many times had I heard that phrase? In movies, in books. It never quite rang true. The image of them, tangled and intimate, was a constant replay. A one-time slip felt too neat, too convenient, especially for a woman who could weave a 3-day lie about a work summit. A quiet suspicion settled in my gut, a slow, insidious burn. This wasn't just a mistake. It felt like something more, something deeper. The next day, during my lunch break, I called Peter Davies, an old family friend, now a successful attorney in Springfield. His number had been in my phone for years, a relic from another life. Pete, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Long time no talk. Hope you're doing well. We exchanged pleasantries for a moment before I got to the point, carefully choosing my words. I'm looking for some advice, purely hypothetical, you understand, about marital dissolution. What does that even look like in a place like Illinois? What are the options? I stressed the need for absolute discretion. Pete, always sharp, understood immediately. He offered to send some general information. No commitment, no names mentioned. Life outside our house continued, oblivious. The neighbors waved as they mowed their lawns. Kids rode bikes down the street, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Our suburban home, with its manicured lawn and neat porch, was a picture of Midwestern normalcy. No one knew the crack that had appeared within. This quiet oblivion only intensified my isolated torment. My mother, Carol, arrived later that week, a warm casserole dish cradled in her arms. She didn't ask probing questions, just sat with me in the kitchen, her presence a quiet balm. Your father told me you two were having some difficulties, she said, her voice soft. He didn't really elaborate, Just wanted to see how you were doing." Her eyes, kind and knowing, met mine. I recounted a censored version, omitting the most graphic details, but conveying the core betrayal. She just listened, occasionally reaching out to squeeze my hand. "It'll be hard, Ethan," she said, "but you'll get through it. You're strong." The next day, Robert called, not to inquire about my well-being, but about a rather large family investment. "Ethan, did you get those papers I sent? We need to finalize this before the end of the quarter. Good returns, you know." His voice was brisk, all business, as if our earlier conversation about Sarah had been wiped clean from his memory. I gave him short, clipped answers, a further confirmation of his emotional distance. Our first counseling session was a sterile room with beige walls and uncomfortable chairs. Sarah sat across from me, her posture tight, her words a torrent of remorse. "I understand I broke your trust, Ethan. I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you." I sat mostly silent, offering only factual statements when prompted by the counselor. I wasn't there to rehash emotions. I was there to assess the damage, to understand the path forward, if any. It was during this session that the counselor asked about Greg. Sarah hesitated. "He works at my firm, in accounting," she admitted, her voice low. The revelation hit me like a dull thud. Not just a random encounter, but someone she'd see at the office, in meetings, in the hallways. The thought of them sharing an elevator, exchanging polite nods, made my stomach churn. "I'll transfer departments," she quickly added, seeing my expression. The offer felt too late, too little. Sleep became a fractured thing. The image of Sarah and Greg replayed in my mind's eye, a grainy film loop. The clean lines of my life, the ordered existence I had built, had become irrevocably blurred. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, or sometimes at old photographs. Our wedding album opened to a page where we stood smiling, our faces radiant with a hopeful future. Sarah in her white dress looking at me with such adoration. I traced her face with my finger, trying to reconcile that joyful woman with the stranger who had lied so easily. Sarah tried. She left small notes on the kitchen counter, brewed my coffee just right, even offered to do my laundry. But each gesture felt like an intrusion. When her hand brushed mine, a jolt of revulsion shot through me. Her presence, once a comfort, now felt like a constant accusation. Her apologies, her fervent promises, they were all there. But beneath them, I sensed a deeper truth, a narrative carefully constructed to minimize her betrayal, to protect herself, a hidden depth she still wasn't ready to reveal. My surgical training instilled a methodical approach, a need to examine every detail. This trait, usually reserved for delicate procedures, now turned inward. Sarah's narrative of a one-time slip felt too thin. I started subtle investigations. I pulled up her old work calendars, cross-referencing her stated travel dates with hotel bills, with the sparse mentions of her absences in my own mental timeline. The pharmaceutical summit in Milwaukee was the obvious lie. But what about the others? The team-building retreat in St. Louis, the conference in Chicago. Details, once innocent, now held a new, sinister weight. I checked her social media. Sarah wasn't one for extensive online activity, but there were the usual connections. Greg Miller's name appeared in her friends list, a face in a few group photos from work events. Harmless at first glance, but a deeper scroll, a more focused eye, revealed small things. A like on a post from Greg from 6 months ago. A comment about a shared inside joke on a picture taken last spring. Tiny threads, nearly invisible, now woven into a pattern of familiarity that predated the one-time story. Then came the anonymous email. A generic Hotmail address, a single terse line. Sarah and Greg have been seeing each other for over a year. Ask about the training sessions in Indianapolis. No name, no further details, just that cold, stark sentence. It confirmed what my gut already suspected. It felt like a punch, but also a vindication. That evening, I waited for Sarah in the living room, the anonymous email still on my laptop screen. When she came in, she tried a hesitant smile. "Ready for dinner?" I didn't answer directly. "Indianapolis," I said, my voice calm, almost clinical. "Remember those training sessions you had there last fall? And the one in the spring?" Her face, previously soft with practiced remorse, tightened. What about them? You told me they were mandatory, long days, early flights back. Turns out, I continued, there were no training sessions. Not for you, anyway. And the hotel records for those specific dates show a double booking under a different name. But the credit card linked to it, Sarah, was yours. I wasn't angry. Anger would have been a wasted emotion. This was about facts, about the unraveling of a carefully constructed fiction. She stammered, then sighed, a defeated sound. Okay, Ethan, it wasn't just a one-time thing. It's been on and off for a while, but it was just because you were never here. I was so lonely. She repeated the excuse, a broken record, trying to deflect, to dilute her culpability. But the loneliness argument felt like a thin veil, easily torn. The revelations kept coming, each one a fresh cut. Not only had she fabricated the Indianapolis trips, but several other work trips had been similarly used. The meticulously planned lies, the calculated deceptions, weighed heavily on me. My initial heartbreak had transformed into a cold, determined resolve. The man I had been who trusted implicitly was gone. In his place was someone sharper, colder, fueled by a quiet, simmering rage. I researched Greg Miller too. A quick search revealed his professional profile. An accomplished account manager at Sarah's firm with a neat, respectable photo, a list of awards, and glowing recommendations. A public image of competence and integrity. Another layer of hypocrisy. Then I found it. His LinkedIn profile mentioned his wife, Eleanor, and their two young children. A photo of them, smiling, a seemingly perfect family. Another betrayal, another silent victim. The thought of reaching out to Eleanor crossed my mind, a fleeting, dangerous impulse. What would it achieve? More pain? More destruction? A wider ripple effect, catching innocent children in its wake. I held back, for now. In our next counseling session, the counselor, a woman named Dr. Evans, observed the shift. Ethan, I notice you've become very quiet, and Sarah, your distress seems to be growing. She picked up on my increasing detachment, my focus on the mechanics of our interaction rather than the emotions. Sarah, meanwhile, was a cascade of apologies and tears, her desperation evident. Dr. Evans understood, though she didn't voice it explicitly, that the breach of trust was profound, perhaps irreparable. I withdrew further. Friends called, but I didn't return their calls. How do you explain this? How do you articulate the shame, the white-hot rage, the feeling of being utterly played for a fool? It felt too raw, too humiliating to put into words. My mother, Carol, was the only one I could truly talk to. She didn't press, didn't judge, just sat with me, often in silence. One afternoon, I finally broke. The details spilled out, the anonymous email, the fabricated trips, the full extent of Sarah's deceit. I felt the familiar burn behind my eyes, but no tears came. She made me look like an idiot, Mom, I said, my voice rough. She made a fool out of me. Carol reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. No, Ethan, she said softly, her eyes unwavering. She made a fool out of herself and out of him. Her words were a steady, non-judgmental anchor. In that moment, a quiet thought solidified in my mind, unwavering and clear. Sarah and Greg, both of them, needed to pay the price for their deceit. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. This was about justice. My technical skills, usually applied to operating room equipment, now served a different purpose. Sarah had old phones, tablets, forgotten in drawers, devices she'd thought wiped clean, discarded. But I knew better. With a few specialized tools and late nights hunched over a desk, I started the painstaking process of digital forensics. Deleted messages, archived emails, hidden photo albums. They slowly resurfaced, pixel by pixel, word by word. The timeline quickly expanded beyond months. The earliest conversations between Sarah and Greg went back almost 3 years. 3 years. This wasn't a recent lapse in judgment. This was a sustained, deliberate campaign of deceit. It predated our last big family vacation, the one where she had clung to my arm, smiling for the camera, whispering how happy she was. The sheer depth of the lie was staggering. Then I found the financial irregularities. Not just dinners or coffee, but shared hotel bills under different names, weekend getaways disguised as conferences. There were records of lavish gifts, expensive jewelry for Sarah, a high-end watch for Greg. Not just an affair, but an entanglement, a shared secret life built on my trust in our joint resources. The extent of the financial deception was a cold, hard slap. The messages between them grew bolder, more intimate. "I can't wait for us to be together properly," Greg had written. Sarah had replied, "Soon, my love, just a little longer than we can start our real life." They were making future plans, discussing leaving their spouses, building a life together. Not a one-time slip, not loneliness. This was a calculated, long-term strategy. The house of cards I thought was my marriage, my family, my understanding of Sarah, crumbled completely, leaving only dust and broken pieces. My initial heartbreak, the sharp, searing pain, had transmuted. It was gone, replaced by a potent, icy rage. Not a hot, explosive anger, but a cold, calculating fury. This wasn't just an affair, it was an elaborate, malicious scheme. My father's callous move-on advice, once a chorus of pain, now echoed in my head, but with a different resonance. Move on? No. This ignited a deeper desire to prove him wrong, to act, to do more than simply walk away. I met with Pete Davies again, the lawyer. I laid out the new evidence, the recovered messages, the financial documents, the years-long timeline. He read through it, his face grim. "Ethan," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose, "this changes things significantly. This isn't just a standard divorce. This is grounds for a much more substantial settlement in your favor." And he paused. "This kind of behavior, particularly with a coworker, can have severe professional ramifications for both of them, especially in the corporate world, for someone in Sarah's position, and certainly for Greg." The implications were clear. I learned more about Greg's family. Eleanor, his unsuspecting wife, lived in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood a few towns over. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, pictured on social media, all smiles and innocence. The knowledge intensified my moral dilemma. Did I want to bring this destruction to another family? But then my gaze hardened. Greg had made that choice when he started this. Sarah, sensing the growing distance, the impenetrable coldness in my eyes, became increasingly desperate. Her apologies were more frantic, her gestures more insistent. She knew she was losing me irrevocably. Her carefully constructed narrative was in tatters, and she could see the truth in my silence. One afternoon I drove, not to clear my head, but with a destination in mind, Greg Miller's neighborhood. I drove slowly, a phantom in his suburban streets. His house, a respectable 2-story, with a swing set in the backyard. The family car, a sensible SUV, sat in the driveway. It looked normal, peaceful, an ordinary deception. I didn't stop, didn't approach, just observed. It felt like a necessary reconnaissance. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, seeing a man transformed. The naive, trusting surgeon was gone. His eyes, once open and earnest, were now colder, sharper, marked by the betrayal. The lines around my mouth were set. My mother, Carol, called, her voice tinged with concern. "Ethan, honey, I know you're hurting, but please try to find some peace. Don't let this consume you. Your own well-being is important." Her plea for peace was genuine, but it couldn't penetrate the resolve that had calcified within me. A conscious, deliberate choice formed in my mind. I would not simply divorce Sarah. I would not allow them to simply walk away from this, to continue their lives as if nothing had happened. Sarah and Greg would face tangible consequences for their actions. This was no longer just about pain, it was about justice. The phrase began to cycle in my mind, pay the price. It wasn't a whisper anymore, but a silent internal mantra, a cold affirmation of my new objective. The world had gone quiet around this singular thought. I sat in my study, the faint glow of the streetlights painting the walls, and started to map it out. A multi-pronged strategy, legal, professional, social, each avenue a path to a consequence. This wouldn't be a swift, clean surgical cut. This would be deliberate, precise, and thorough. I confided in Dr. Davies, a senior attending surgeon at the hospital, not for emotional handholding, but for practical advice. He was a man of quiet authority, with a network that stretched across the medical community and beyond. Hypothetically, David, I began after swearing him to secrecy, if someone in a corporate position were found to have committed ethical breaches involving company resources for personal gain, how would that typically be handled? He listened, his gaze steady, then outlined the potential avenues: internal investigations, professional review boards, impact on reputation and future career prospects. His calm, factual responses were exactly what I needed. My research extended to Sarah's and Greg's industry, corporate ethics policies, non-disclosure agreements, codes of conduct. There were pathways for reporting misconduct, channels for exposing financial impropriety, especially when it involved company time and resources. I started building a case, not just for a divorce, but for something far more encompassing. My lawyer, Pete, received regular updates, each piece of evidence strengthening our position, maximizing leverage. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. She still spoke of our marriage during counseling sessions, still clung to the notion that we were working towards reconciliation. She would offer small smiles, mention future plans, and even once tentatively reached for my hand. Her misguided hope, fueled by my silence, was a strange, grim spectacle. She saw glimmers of false hope, mistaking my cold calculation for a slow thaw. She didn't realize she was looking at a man whose heart had turned to stone. The issue of Greg's wife, Eleanor, still weighed on me. Direct confrontation felt too messy, too loud. No, that wasn't the way. I planned a more subtle approach, a way for the truth to reach her, undeniable and discreet, a seed planted in fertile ground. Let the revelation come from within her own circle, perhaps from an anonymous source that couldn't be traced back to me. I also considered my own professional network. Years of building a reputation, of quiet competence, had given me a certain standing in the community. Not for overt manipulation, but for subtle influence. Who knew whom? Who might quietly observe? The Midwestern grapevine was a potent, if understated, force. The moral implications of my actions hovered, a dark cloud. Was this justice? Or was it revenge, pure and unadulterated? The lines blurred, indistinguishable in the cold light of my resolve. But then I remembered the images, Sarah and Greg in our bed, the years of lies, the callous disregard for our life together. The thought of their future plans, their shared laughter. The doubt evaporated, replaced by the bitter taste of betrayal. Sometimes I'd find myself standing in the hallway, staring at our bedroom door. The very door I had pushed open, the one that had revealed the wreckage of my life. It wasn't just a door, it was a portal to a past that was now irrevocably tainted. It solidified my resolve, anchoring me to the path I had chosen. One night I sat down and drafted a letter to Sarah. I didn't intend to send it, but the act of writing was a catharsis. Every lie, every deception, every false word she had spoken laid bare on the page. I outlined my intentions, the consequences she and Greg would face. It was harsh, unforgiving, a torrent of suppressed rage and pain. When I finished, I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer, a testament to what was to come. I occasionally checked Greg Miller's online presence, his professional profile, his carefully curated posts about work-life balance and integrity, a public image crafted for success. A grim satisfaction settled over me, knowing that it was about to be shattered. My mother, Carol, was the only one who seemed to truly sense the shift. "Ethan," she said one evening, her voice soft with worry, "you're not grieving anymore. You're different. Just remember, your peace is important. Don't let bitterness take root." Her concern was clear, her intuition sharp. But her words bounced off the emotional wall I had constructed around myself. Sarah especially found it impenetrable. There was no emotional ground left for her to tread, no shared space for remorse or understanding. Only the cold, hard facts remained. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The blueprint for retribution began to solidify. With Pete Davies, my lawyer, we devised a strategy for professional exposure. Anonymously, subtly, the information would reach the pharmaceutical firm's HR and ethics department. No direct accusations, no emotional pleas, just facts, cold and hard. I spent hours crafting a series of emails and compiling documents. deleted messages, hotel receipts, bank statements, all carefully sanitized of my personal fingerprints, presented as objective evidence of misconduct. I studied their company's policies, workplace relationships, conflicts of interest, misuse of company resources. Each policy I read seemed custom-made for Sarah and Greg's transgressions. There were clear guidelines, unambiguous language, violations that carried severe consequences. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about professional integrity, a breach of trust in the workplace, woven with financial irregularities. Pete was working on the divorce petition, tailoring it to reflect the magnitude of the betrayal. He drafted demands for a significantly higher share of our joint assets, citing Sarah's long-term infidelity, the financial malfeasance, and the emotional distress caused. He also factored in the costs of a prolonged legal battle, should she choose to fight it. The most delicate part of the plan involved Greg's wife. I purchased a burner phone and a new email address, untraceable. The package would be anonymous, delivered by a service that left no digital or physical trail back to me. It would contain photocopies of key documents, the most damning messages, the shared hotel bills, the evidence of lavish gifts, irrefutable proof. No explanation, just the truth, delivered like a silent bomb. Timing was everything. Each step had to be perfectly orchestrated for maximum impact. The HR report, the divorce papers, the package to Eleanor. They would hit like a series of unexpected blows, designed to catch Sarah and Greg completely off guard, denying them the chance to coordinate their stories or minimize the damage. This meticulous planning, this dark craftsmanship, gave me a renewed sense of purpose. The overwhelming pain was still there, but now it was channeled, transmuted into a cold, focused energy. It was a way to exert control over a situation where I had felt utterly powerless. Sarah's frustration mounted. In counseling, her pleas grew more desperate, her voice often rising in thinly veiled anger. "Why won't you talk to me, Ethan? Why are you so cold?" She couldn't penetrate the wall. My refusal to engage emotionally, my stoic silence chipped away at her. She mistook my detachment for a chance to manipulate, a sign that she might still win me back. She couldn't see the gears turning behind my eyes. My mother, Carol, was a steady, quiet presence. She still expressed concern, but she also offered practical help. "Do you need help packing boxes?" she asked, her gaze gentle, understanding my need for order, for control. She stood by me, a silent anchor in the gathering storm. My father, Robert, remained blissfully ignorant, occasionally calling to discuss enwebments, oblivious to the emotional intensity of my life. His absence was a stark reminder of his own emotional detachment, and I found I didn't care. I rehearsed the inevitable confrontations in my head, Sarah's tears, her pleas for forgiveness, Greg's potential bluster or attempts at a denial. I hardened myself against all of it. There would be no room for sentiment, no quarter for weakness. I reviewed the collected evidence one last time, a thick binder filled with printouts and notes. The weight of it, the undeniable truth contained within those pages, reinforced my conviction. My actions were justified. This wasn't revenge, it was an exacting of justice. In the quiet of the evenings, I meticulously organized my personal affairs, updated my will, secured important documents, transferred funds to separate accounts. I was preparing for a storm, ensuring my own stability, my own future, would weather the fallout. A chilling calm settled over me, the quiet before the execution of the plan. Outside, the Midwestern summer bloomed in full, vibrant green. The cicadas hummed their ancient song, the evening stretched long and warm. This mundane beauty, this picture of peaceful domesticity, served as a surreal, almost mocking backdrop to the brewing storm. The anonymous package, thick with documented evidence, was sent. The target, key personnel in the pharmaceutical firm's HR and ethics departments. A few days later, Pete confirmed. "They've launched an internal investigation, Ethan. They're taking it very seriously." The news was delivered with a quiet satisfaction, a small nod of accomplishment. Around the same time, the second package reached its destination. Greg Miller's unsuspecting wife, Eleanor. My burner phone buzzed with an alert from a news aggregator I had set up for local court filings. A temporary restraining order had been filed, citing marital discord and emotional distress. Greg's home life had imploded, just as planned. The thought of Eleanor confronting him, the raw shock and betrayal on her face, offered a grim, bitter satisfaction. Sarah, meanwhile, started to unravel. Her calls and emails to me became more frantic. "They're asking me about expense reports, Ethan," she cried during one brief, unavoidable encounter in the kitchen. "They want to know about my travel. What's going on?" Her panic was escalating, a tangible thing in the air between us. She sensed the shift in the corporate winds, the sudden scrutiny, but she still couldn't connect it to me. The implosion of Greg's home life was swift and dramatic. Neighbors later recounted loud arguments, a car screeching out of the driveway late at night. The children, I imagined, caught in the crossfire. A part of me felt a pang for them, but Greg had made his choices. Then came the final strike. Pete served Sarah with the divorce papers, not just a generic filing, but a thick document detailing the accusations, citing the years of long-term infidelity, the fabricated trips, the financial malfeasance, and the demand for a substantial settlement. When she read it, her face drained of color. She found me in the living room an hour later, the papers clutched in her hand, her eyes blazing with fury and tears. "You're a monster, Ethan," she screamed, her voice cracking. "How could you do this? This is cruel." I looked at her, my expression unwavering. "Cruelty?" My voice was calm, a low hum of facts. "You built a life of lies, Sarah, for years. You used my trust, my resources, to fund an affair. You thought you could just apologize it away, minimize it as a one-time slip. You brought these consequences on yourself, every single one of them." There was no emotion in my voice, only the cold, hard clarity of truth. Separately, Sarah and Greg were brought in for questioning by their company's HR and ethics committee. The meetings were long, the questions pointed. Rumors and whispers started to circulate through their professional circles. Careers carefully built over years, reputations meticulously cultivated, began to unravel. The damage was swift, and it was pervasive. Greg, desperate, tried to contact me. Texts from unknown numbers, a blocked call from an intermediary friend. Pleas for me to back off, an offer of money, anything to make this go away. I ignored them all. My resolve was firm, impervious to their desperate attempts at negotiation. There was no going back. My mother, Carol, called, her voice soft with worry. "Ethan," she said, "I know you feel wronged, and rightly so, but please don't let this consume you entirely. There's a fine line between justice and something else. Are you finding any peace in this?" Her concern was genuine, a quiet worry about the toll this relentless pursuit was taking on me. I observed the unfolding chaos I had set in motion. Greg's broken home, Sarah's unraveling career, the professional whispers. There was a grim satisfaction, a sense of having righted a profound wrong, but beneath it, an unexpected sense of emptiness. The vengeance, once a burning motivation, now felt hollow, leaving a void. The story, though not splashed across headlines, began to spread within our immediate community. Hushed conversations in grocery store aisles, averted gazes at the local coffee shop. The public eye, though subtle, was watching. Our quiet Midwestern lives were no longer so quiet. The disciplinary actions at the pharmaceutical firm were swift and severe. Greg Miller was terminated for egregious ethical violations and misuse of company resources. Sarah, due to her longer tenure and slightly different role, was given a choice: immediate resignation or termination with cause, which would impact her future employment. She chose to resign, a public acknowledgement of her professional downfall. Greg's marriage officially crumbled. The restraining order became permanent, and Eleanor filed for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional abuse. It was a bitter public affair, the details filtering through the community like a cold draft. The once private lives of two ordinary people were now laid bare, a cautionary tale. Sarah, stripped of her career and facing a harsh divorce settlement, made a final desperate plea. A text message, simple and direct. "Can we talk? One last time? For everything we had." I agreed, not for reconciliation, but for a definitive end. The meeting was in a neutral coffee shop, the air thick with unspoken history. She looked small across the table, her face drawn, her eyes swollen from days of crying. "Ethan," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, can't we just stop this? We had a life, a good one. Don't throw it all away." I looked out the window at the Midwestern winter beginning to settle, the gray sky mirroring the landscape of my heart. "We had a life built on your lies, Sarah," I stated, my voice even, unflinching. "For 3 years. You fabricated trips, misused our finances, made future plans with another man while you slept in my bed. You asked for this. Every single consequence. It was a choice, Sarah, a series of choices, not a one-time slip." I laid out the full extent of her deception, not with anger, but with the cold, precise truth, each word a stone placed upon her. Her composure shattered, her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands, soft sobs escaping. There was no anger left in her, only a profound, crushing defeat. The weight of her actions finally had descended upon her. She didn't lash out, she simply broke. The divorce settlement was finalized. Pete had secured a settlement heavily favoring me, reflecting the long-term infidelity and financial malfeasance. Sarah lost significant assets, her professional standing ruined, her future uncertain. The legal chapter closed, a grim victory. Greg's public humiliation was complete. His professional downfall, combined with the messy details of his divorce, circulated widely. His carefully constructed public image had been utterly demolished. Justice, in its coldest form, had been served. I felt a sense of vindication, yes, a quiet, grim satisfaction that the scales had been balanced. But it was a hollow victory. The destruction of their lives had come at the cost of my own peace, the demolition of my marriage leaving a vast, empty space where a future once stood. Robert Campbell, hearing the full details of Sarah's ruin and Greg's spectacular fall, finally offered a rare, begrudging acknowledgement. "Well, Ethan," he said over the phone, his voice still devoid of warmth, "at least you handled it. Didn't let her walk all over you." Even in his acknowledgement, there was no empathy, only a detached observation of strategy. My mother, Carol, was different. She came over, and when I opened the door, she simply pulled me into a long, silent hug. She didn't say much, just held me, her warmth a stark contrast to the coldness that had settled in my soul. She recognized the depth of my pain, even in my victory. I returned to my quiet house. It was truly empty now. Sarah's things were gone, the guest room no longer even a temporary refuge for her. The silence was profound, a monument to a life that once was, now reduced to wreckage. A glimmer of regret, fleeting but sharp, passed through me. Was the price paid truly worth the peace of mind? Had the act of exacting revenge corroded a part of myself, leaving me colder, harder, irrevocably changed? The question hung in the air, unanswered. The entire painful process officially concluded. A chapter closed, leaving me to rebuild from the ashes. I began to contemplate a future without Sarah, a path I had never envisioned, but one I must now forge alone, step by careful step. The days after the final settlement blurred into weeks, then months. I began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. My career, the steady focus of my life, offered a tangible anchor. Long hours in the operating room were a familiar comfort, a place where precision and order still held sway. I started seeing a therapist, not Dr. Evans, but someone new, to talk through the wreckage, to learn how to navigate this altered landscape of self. Sarah's reality was starkly diminished. Her professional life, once promising, was in tatters. She struggled to find new employment, her name now a whispered warning in corporate circles. Financially, the divorce had left her with little, the cost of her choices heavy and undeniable. I heard she eventually moved away, to a different state, seeking anonymity, a fresh start she hadn't truly earned. Greg Miller fared no better. His career was definitively ruined, his name synonymous with professional misconduct. His family, once a picture of suburban normalcy, was fractured beyond repair. He faced a bleak future, isolated, a pariah in the community he once thrived in. Over time, the intensity of the scandal diminished. The hushed conversations in the grocery aisles became less frequent, the averted gazes less pronounced. But the memory lingered, a quiet cautionary tale woven into the fabric of the community. People knew and they remembered. I spent many hours in quiet reflection, staring out at the changing seasons from my window. Had the pursuit of justice truly brought me peace? Or had it left me scarred, the act of revenge corroding a part of my soul? The lines between them, once so clear, felt permanently blurred. I had made Sarah and Greg pay a price, a steep one. But I too had paid. My innocence, my unquestioning trust had been irrevocably lost. The man I was before the discovery, the man who believed in a simple, honest life, was gone. The therapist spoke of self-forgiveness, not for the affair, which was not mine to forgive, but for the anger, the calculated actions, the coldness I had embraced. It was a slow, difficult process, accepting this new reality, this new version of myself. My mother, Carol, remained a steadfast source of love. She didn't judge my actions, only offered quiet support, a constant, gentle presence as I navigated the treacherous waters of emotional recovery. My father, Robert, continued his detached existence, occasionally calling with an impersonal inquiry. He was a painful reminder of the kind of man I refused to become, distant and emotionally unavailable. The house, once a home, now felt like a mausoleum of memories. I started to contemplate a move, a change of scenery, a new city perhaps, where the streets held no ghosts of a past life, where every corner wasn't a reminder of what was lost. The Midwestern home, with its quiet lawns and familiar streets, held too many painful recollections. I carried with me the hard-won lessons about trust, about betrayal, and the profound impact of choices. My life had been irrevocably altered. I emerged from the ordeal a changed man, quieter, more guarded, but with a newfound inner strength, a resilience born of fire. The thought of future relationships felt daunting. The deep scars remained, a protective barrier that would be difficult to lower. But I knew that true healing meant not living in the shadow of the past. Occasionally, the ghost of my past life with Sarah would flicker, a bittersweet memory of what they once had, a fleeting image of happiness that felt both real and impossibly distant. Ultimately, I found a quiet resolve to move forward. The moral consequences of infidelity, I understood, reverberated far beyond the initial act, shaping new futures for everyone involved. For Sarah and Greg, futures diminished by their deceit. For me, a future forged in solitude, but with the quiet hope of eventually finding a different kind of peace.